Training, Research and Development Assistant with Haven Horizons and Knowledge Broker on the Virtual Community of Practice. Today we are delighted to welcome Roisin Shanahan from SETU to discuss her work. But before I hand you over to Roisin, first a big welcome to all of our new members on the community and a brief run through of the format. So if anyone has any questions, you can add them into the chat. We just may have time for maybe one question at the end, but post them into the chat and we can put them up in the community in the Lunch and Learn section afterwards. And I'll give a brief community update after the presentation. So Roisin Shanahan is the Sexual Violence and Harassment, that's the SVH Prevention and Response Manager in the Southeast Technological University, SETU. She's worked in SETU for over 20 years, heading prominent roles across multiple fields. These include human resources, equality, diversion and inclusion, as well as her current position as head of the SVH unit, which focuses on education, creating bespoke SVH training for staff, awareness raising for staff and students, and tackling important issues such as consent and bystander intervention. Roisin completed the THUS accredited course in reflecting on and responding to domestic abuse and coercive control, which is delivered by Madeleine McAleer from Haven Horizons. And Roisin will give us some insight now on how her work contributes towards a campus culture which is safe, respectful and supportive. So over to you.
My name is Roisin Shanahan and I am the Tackling Sexual Violence, Sexual Harassment Prevention and Response Manager in SETU. I worked in HR for nearly 20 years and I've worked then in the SETU, we call it Diversity and Inclusion Unit. And just there on my, title slide there, just to draw your attention that we work with a number of different students and the staff across the university. That photograph was actually a picture that was painted by one of our Gazan sanctuary students that we were able to get out of Gaza. And it is called Standing Sleeping Up, and it's by a student, Habib. And basically, she's a Syrian refugee, and she painted that picture of how it looked for her and felt how it was in a Syrian refugee where everybody was sleeping at night in a tent standing up. So just to kind of show you that the Sexual Violence and Harassment sits within an EDI unit where there's other work going on as well in the background. So that's just to give you just a little insight into some of the work. So today I'm going to talk about how SETU works towards the creation of a safe, respectful, positive, supportive culture on campus, and how we take a zero tolerance approach to sexual violence, harassment and sexual misconduct. How we take a lead role in confronting SVH, sexual violence and harassment, and domestic sexual gender-based violence at third level. How we ensure that the national framework has a long-lasting effect and impact. How we promote a culture of respect and dignity. And then I'll just give you a few examples of the different campaigns and initiatives that we work on to raise awareness and to tackle gender-based violence. So the first thing I'm going to do, some of you may know this already if you work in higher education, so I hope I don't bore you with this information, but I'm going to look at sexual violence and harassment in higher education as a whole. And then I'm going to just speak about the Sexual Violence and Harassment Support Unit, which I lead in SETU, and then look at the types of things that we do in SETU to tackle sexual violence and harassment. So the first thing is that, as we know from all the different lunch and learns, that sexual and gender-based violence is systematic, it's a societal problem, and higher education is reflective of society. But we have a unique opportunity because of, the amount of staff and students that we serve. And I think the murders of Aisling Murphy and Aidan Moffat and Michael Sneed, particularly during COVID-19, shone a spotlight on the issues in Irish society, which may not have really been there before. Since 1996, and this is just females I'm speaking about, so we're not to forget the men, but there has been 276 females murdered up to March 2025. So it is a huge issue. With that in mind, The government felt, they wanted to learn more. Is sexual violence and harassment a problem in higher education? So to find this out, they conducted two surveys. One was with staff and student experiences. This was done in 2021, where I suppose they asked students and staff on, what has happened, how it's handled in universities. And secondly, the Active Consent and Union of Students in Ireland in 2020 also did a survey across all Irish HEs. And out of this, the responses in the report were quite troubling. So even though it seems very low, only 3,500 responses came from the sector with staff. And there's some of just the stats. 81% staff agreed they felt safe. 72% of staff agreed they felt safe from sexual harassment. 52 felt safe voicing concerns, which means the other half didn't. And 69% of staff agreed that they felt a sense of responsibility to engage with the issue of sexual violence and harassment. Again, the staff described half of them being treated differently because of their gender. Less than half reported being condescended, like having, sexual harassment because of their gender. 35% experienced sexist remarks. This is both male and female now. And 60% described sexist hostility and derogatory remarks and treatment based on their gender. If we look at the student data, it's actually even more troubling. This came out of, as I said, the USI, Union of Students of Ireland, and University of Galway Sexual Experience Survey. And the stats there were of female students in 2020, 77% of female students experienced sexual harassment since beginning college. Over half of them have experienced unwanted sexual touching, completed or attempted penetration. So that's attempted rape, like up to half of them. And 29% of female college students have experienced non-consensual penetration by incapacitation. So that's 30% of our students have been raped. Like, that's very, very troubling. And that's for the people who actually answered this survey. Then we have male students. 10% of our male students experienced non-consensual penetration. 70% have experienced sexual harassment, and just less than 30% of male students have experienced unwanted sexual touching, completed or attempted penetration. Again, extremely troubling. When we go to the non-binary students, it's even higher. 90% experience sexual harassment since starting college. Less than 30% have experienced non-consensual penetration, so rape, and 49% have experienced unwanted sexual touching, completed or attempted penetration, again, rape. So it's very worrying. These are some of the disclosure figures. As you can imagine, the male disclosures are slightly lower than females. But again, this is only the people that reported or completed the survey. If you look at the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre report in 2025, you can see that 96% of perpetrators were men or boys. 50% of them contacted the Rape Crisis Centre through text. 57% had not reported it. So these, I suppose, all of this we had to take into consideration. And again, while acknowledging that 88% of sexual survivors were women, we must not forget the 12% of male survivors. So working towards a solution, the outcomes of these surveys, the government decided that, there was policy development and education and training was required for staff and students across all the universities. So they came up with a consent report and a framework, which is called the Safe, Respectful, Supportive and Positive Framework, and then a Propel report and how you action that. So in 2022, the Minister of Education announced funding, which was very forward-thinking at the time, but probably too late. But look, it's in place now, to have a sexual violence and harassment manager in every university in Ireland to implement this consent framework and tackle sexual violence and harassment. So this was really something, the problem was identified and they looked at it, they said, we need to sort this out and to put somebody in place. However, just to draw your attention to that, no domestic abuse or coercive control content was included in that SVH manager's job description or role. So this brings me to then SETU. So eventually, when the advertisement went through and the recruitment happened, and I was successful in the role. I actually started in November 23, so it took a little while for that to happen. So I'm only like a short time really in it, a year and a half, I suppose. And in our sexual violence and harassment support unit, we sit within equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we have a vice president of EDI, and she would sit on executive, and then I'm then the manager of this support unit. Kira, if you want to wave. Kira, who I couldn't do without on a daily basis, she supports the implementation of that consent framework that I spoke about there, that came out of the surveys. And then Anne Murphy is the Consent Matters Project Officer, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. So the unit sits in EDI. We cover 3 campuses. I sit in the Waterford campus, Kira sits in the Carlow campus, and Anne is in Waterford. But we travel around Waterford, Carlow, and Wexford campuses. We've got 18,000 students and 2,500 staff, so it's quite a large remit for such a small unit. So I'm the manager, then with Kira. And the Consent Matters Project Officer, which may be of interest to some of you, is we applied for funding through the Community Safety Innovation Fund, and we received the full amount of 150,000. And Anne Murphy is our Consent Matters Project Officer, and she delivers consent training to all transition year students in all secondary schools in Waterford City and County. So that's a really unique project. And it seems to be, we're at the survey stage now, we're co-designing with the students a programme. So that's very exciting, because perhaps if this works, it could be rolled out across the country. So what is our commitment to tackling sexual violence and harassment? We have an action plan. So it's by the end of 25, we'll have to start, I suppose, drafting a new one, where we have to achieve certain criteria through that. To support the work of our unit, we have an Ending Sexual Violence, Harassment, Prevention and Support Committee. We call it our ESP committee. And that is made up of members of academic, professional support staff across all the campuses and external agencies like our sexual assault units, the Rape Crisis Centre, Carlow, Wexford and Waterford, our community policing on each campus, etc. And then we'll have, local partners, local safety partners from each region as well. We also then have to implement the national consent framework in whatever means we can. And then we have to have supports on our website and have reporting options. A huge part of our work is we deliver training to staff and students. So Kira in particular would be in charge of delivering the active consent to all new first years that come in September. It's part of their orientation. They have to do consent training. Now, personally, and that's why we put in for the funding for TY, it's too late to be doing consent training when they're over 18. And they're, because some of them have already been sexually active. So that's why we're trying to do the preventative piece and get them earlier, and just so that they're aware of it. But it's no harm to deliver it again at orientation, and we try and do it there annually. We also deliver bespoke sexual violence and harassment training to all staff. We've developed it ourselves. We both did, the whole unit have done the level 9 in University of Galway on promoting sexual skills and preventative measures. I can't remember now the title, but that has really helped us, I suppose, design our own bespoke training that's delivered at new staff induction twice a year, and also to the schools and departments as well. We then offer disclosure training, which is delivered through our rape crisis centres. And we have worked with Haven Horizon, which I'll go on to in a little bit more, to deliver the domestic abuse and coercive control. Other things that we are involved with, and I will show you a few photographs later, is various campaigns to raise awareness on our campus. So we had the Travelling Love installation. It is a huge LOVE, a Million Stars project, which has travelled to our Waterford and Carlow campus, and we've had them there for 3 months. We have Go Purple Day, which has now been cancelled actually due to the sudden passing of poor Garda Flatley. May he rest in peace. We are involved in the 16 Days of Activism, which will be the end of November into the 10th of December. We have launched Ask for Angela campaign. It's where we've worked with local vintners in Waterford and in Carlow. Community policing, where we train staff in the pub, so that students in particular on nights out can ask for Angela behind the bar to ensure that they get safely home or if they feel uncomfortable. And we also, instead of looking at red flags, we did the green flag initiative, where we got students talking about what are green flags in relationships. And again, opening conversations is what it's really all about. We also have won a number of awards on our work for sexual violence and harassment, and we won the Smile Award in Barcelona in November 23, and we got a paper out of it, which was wonderful. So just one of the main things that our ESB committee is working on, particularly we have 4 working groups. One is policy working group, another is a student working group, a staff working group, and a PR and marketing working group. But the policy working group at the moment, we decided to go with students first, because it tends to be more students that are sexually harassed or are victims or survivors of sexual violence and harassment. And we're drafting what we are calling a tackling sexual violence, sexual harassment and sexual misconduct policy for students. Some universities have decided to put staff and students together. We've decided not to. Staff have a legislative remit, students don't. So it just was getting very complex. So we've decided to do 2 separate policies and procedures. We would hope for this to go to union consultation on the 1st of September. Once our executive have reviewed it, it's on the agenda for the 20th of June. Once that's approved, we will put training in place for all the heads of department so that they are able to advise, and course leaders, so that they will be able to advise students. There may be some resistance for lecturers. They might not want to take this on, and it's not in their contracts. So it's really on goodwill that these staff will sign up to, I suppose, to do the training. So that's a little bit about that. We've also decided to include sexual misconduct, because we thought sometimes it's not harassment, but it's just their conduct needs to be looked at, in particular with students. So I've mentioned again that there was no coercive control and domestic abuse in my job description, but I really wanted to learn more, because we noticed that there's a lot of coercive control in interrelations between students. So I participated in the TU's Haven Horizons Level 6 Reflecting on Responding to Domestic Abuse and Coercive Control training programme in winter 23, and I would advise anybody that to do this. It was, I think, 2.5 hours for 8 or 10 weeks on a Wednesday night, and I made huge contacts. And I suppose even meeting Katharina and Madeline was, here we are now working together all these years later. That's just a quote from myself. Prior to this course, I had very little knowledge of coercive control and domestic violence, so it was wonderful to be introduced to theories and ideas which help in my new role as manager. I am now aware of the agencies that support women, men and the LGBTQI+ community, and how to access them on behalf of any student or staff that comes to me. So it was really worthwhile. Even on my course, I made contacts with guards in Waterford that I would never have had access to, and I'm still able to work with them. So it was really helpful for me starting off in my new role. So the types of collaboration then we did with Haven is we delivered 3 domestic abuse and coercive control workshops for staff in SETU over 23-24. We had a different theme every week. Madeline was also a keynote speaker at our inaugural Tackling Gender-Based Violence Summit that we had. It was a conference held during the 16 days of action there in December 24. We have delivered at the River Project conference in January 25. We're actually delivering in Maynooth on, is it the 19th of June, Katharina? And we are delivering in Barcelona in September. So it has been a very worthwhile collaborative partnership. So now I'm just going to very quickly go on to just tackling sexual violence in SETU, and I've probably mentioned a lot of it already, but so we're going to continue offering training and information by delivering active consent, bystander intervention, disclosure training, coercive control and domestic abuse, and listen, that's through the Emily test. That's kind of like a risk assessment. We have Speak Out, which is an anonymous reporting tool I'll speak about in a moment. We will have reporting options once our policy and procedure has been approved. Right now they come through to my office, but in the absence of a policy, you know, we can't discipline, we can't, you know, we really need that policy to be able to do our jobs better, I suppose, but we will still take reports, and we do investigate in the absence of that policy. We are trying to implement the consent framework, and we work with expert agencies through our ESB committee. Then the campaigns I mentioned there, Ask for Angela, Go Purple, 16 Days of Action, Bystander, National Bystander Week, Million Stars, Disclosure, Green Flags, and then the Equitas Conference in Maynooth in June, and the European Conference on Domestic Violence in Barcelona. So to report at the moment, if you're an SETU student or staff, you can report to us directly, to the Sexual Violence Unit, to myself, to the Sexual Assault Treatment Unit, to the Rape Crisis Centres, or to the Guards, and we have a dedicated area on the website. We launched in 2022 an anonymous reporting tool. It's called Speak Out. All the universities have it. You can report. It's for students and staff, and they can disclose instances of bullying, cyberbullying, coercive control, stalking, rape. And you might say, why would they want to do this anonymously? Well, first of all, it gives them a voice, a student or staff, but it also helps in my role and for our university to show it is happening, and we need more resources, because students and staff may feel more comfortable reporting anonymously. So it gives us the stats to keep moving forward with our work. This is a photograph just to show you the multi-agency collaboration piece for our inaugural Gender-Based Violence Summit. So you've got members of the EDI unit and the Sexual Violence Unit from SETU there. You have Anne Scully from our Rape Crisis Centre in Waterford. You have our Guards. You have the Men's Development Network, and you have Madeline. And you also have members from Coon and Emily Test. So it is really all about collaboration. So that was during our 16 days of action. These are some examples. That's the Ask for Angela campaign on campus, our Equitas conference that we hosted, the first one, and we delivered workshops. One of the themes was sexual violence and harassment and gender-based violence. Go Purple Day. This is us meeting the mayor and the chief superintendent that awarded us the 150,000 to deliver the consent. Our Love installation, and our 16 days of action, Orange the World photograph. We've been really fortunate in SETU, where we've won a lot of national and international accreditation awards for our work in EDI, but also on SVH. We won the Irish Education Awards in 2022, and last Thursday in the Crown Plaza in Santry we won 2025, which we were absolutely shocked in, because we did not think you could win it for a second time, but we did. We were the first university to get Gender Equality Champion in the EU, where we got some funding. We won the Smile Award. There's a picture of myself in Barcelona for the work on sexual violence and harassment. We were finalists in the National Diversity Awards for our LGBT inclusion, and we also, by embedding equality into the curriculum, and a Sanctuary Award for Gazan students from Syrian refugees. We won an award for that. There in November, we won the Waterford Business Awards for EDI and Workplace Excellence. And next Friday, we are up for the EDI Excellence Award with the Wexford Chamber of Commerce. So there's fingers crossed that we will do well in that. And finally, reflections on since I started this role. We need more funding, so we need more staff, we need more resources. Something they didn't build into our posts. I'm from, I suppose, an academic background, so supervision and counselling for SVH staff, I think it would be really important, just like self-care. I think a lot of our investigations where a student or staff reports to us, there isn't a system set up where we have external investigators for all the universities. The government won't take this on. They want us to pay for it ourselves. That is not possible. It would be brilliant if there was one trained organisation that we could use. Obviously, again, being government, we've got to go through tender processes, and that's sometimes difficult because you don't get trauma-informed investigators. So that's really important. I'd like to see that. A sectoral approach to reporting around FOI requests. We have been, I'm going to use the word, bothered by journalists looking for how many cases you have of sexual harassment, how many formal cases, how many investigations. And this is very difficult if you only had one case in that year, because we don't want to identify that student or staff. So up to now, we are saying less than 10, we don't provide the numbers. And often the FOI requests they're not happy with that. And it's generally journalists looking for it. It's not, the HEA. Again, all the universities are off spending hours and hours. Actually, it's taken nearly a year to get our policy to where it is. It'd be wonderful if there was one national sexual violence and harassment policy, but there isn't. And because SETU only became SETU on the 1st of May 2022, because Carlow IT and Waterford IT merged, there is challenges because our systems and our websites haven't completely integrated just yet. So look, that will happen in time. Yeah, so that's kind of it for me.